talking about traditions and customs.
Yes.
There's one tradition and custom that does not go away, that of politicking. In fact, today the cabinet was quote unquote lit. Very lit. In fact, the only way to know it was lit is what President Uhuru Kenyatta said on his way to Arusha.
In the lights.
And he passed by various places and he had stopovers, Kitengela, Athi River, and so on and so forth. And so that you know the cabinet meeting today was lit. Listen to what the president had to say about that meeting.
Na mimi nimewaambia, na hata leo nimekuwa na baraza ya waziri, na nimewaambia, wewe kama huko tayari kufanyia wananchi kazi na jukumu lako ni siasa, piga about turn. Vijana niko nao wengi ambao wako tayari kufanya kazi. Tunaelewana? Tunaelewana? Au mwasemaji jameni? Mnakubaliana na mimi? Yetu sisi ni kazi. Wakuje hapa Kitengela, wawaulize nyinyi shida yenu ni nini, wawaulize tabu za Kitengela ni gani, na sisi kama serikali tutawasaidia kwa njia gani. Sio kuja hapa kuwaletea porojo na siasa ya dunia ambayo hakuna kitu ambayo itasaidia mtu. Sijui kama tunaelewana wenzangu. Tunaelewana? Na niye didhakaga datu wanane duoto. Tunaelewana? Watu wafanyie wananchi kazi. Na kama siasa yako ni story, muende story upande mwingine. Lakini serikali ya Uhuru Kenyatta ni ile ambayo itatimiza ahadi ambazo walipatia wananchi wa Jamhuri ya Kenya. Period.
Let me translate something small there. There's something he said that when I say something, I have said na hakuna kurudi nyuma. Yvonne, I've heard you say you wish you were that fly
on the wall,
in that cabinet meeting.
In the lit cabinet meeting. The first cabinet meeting after the executive order, and the first cabinet meeting of the year.
True.
And then politicking and that sort of thing that is coming out. Obviously, we know what happened. I would wonder who he was talking about in the cabinet.
Well, the cabinet comprises the president, the deputy president, cabinet secretaries, and secretary to the cabinet.
Thank you.
So pick one.
Okay.
Or pick...
No, not me, but thank you. That was the only question I had.
It's difficult to tell what really transpired in that cabinet meeting, because what we have is a bit of self-reporting from the president, saying that I told them. He placed them in a corner. We don't know why. Because the last time he had grievances against anyone in cabinet was over the maize issue.
Yes.
And he appeared to put a lot of pressure on Mwangi Kiunjuri, the CS for agriculture. This is something the public will be, wondering how to really unpack. What is the issue in the cabinet? Who are you addressing? What have they done? What have they done? What are you accusing them of? Are you asking them to work harder? And what is the issue? I think that did not come out clearly.
But I think that there's a context to it. I mean, before the cabinet meeting, we understand that there was some sort of disquiet, or perhaps something milder than that people were asking questions, people here being CSS, about that executive order. What does this mean for us? Who is this person who is now like in charge of all of us?
Head boy of the cabinet.
Exactly. And if that is true, that indeed there were members of the cabinet who were asking those kinds of questions, I would imagine the president explained to them exactly what he was talking about, and perhaps saw that as part of the politicking. But remember also that there's been grumbling in certain quarters around the president about what was seen as too much focus on the 2022 presidential bid of William Ruto. And so it is not beyond imagination that the scope of that included this, that actually there are people in here who have been out there, and there are people who are out there who I will tell when I go to that rally that have been focusing on 2022 instead of my agenda. Because did you notice that the president said serikali ya Uhuru Kenyatta?
Yes, yes.
Which is not a misplaced statement. It is not a coincidence.
There's only one president.
It's actually it's an editorial change.
Yeah, it's actually it is not as a statement out of the blue. The president is saying my government, yes. And therefore what I'm telling you is what I have decided that I will do with my government, and so you will do like, and that is the way he found it necessary to speak in Latin, and actually said that what I have said,
after what the president said, he said that I mean, like he looked agitated, like ni kama alisomea watu leo katika mkutano. But a few hours before the president spoke in Kitengela, there was a statement that was issued by the office of the Deputy President William Ruto. And one of the things that the DP told politicians to leave his name out of their shenanigans as he's working to support the president to ensure the Jubilee's Big Four agenda succeeds. There are very strong wordings on that statement. And I read in part, at no time has the Deputy President approved, canvassed or engaged in any other form of preparation for a presidential or another campaign after the last presidential election. The Deputy President therefore asked those running noisy charades and mock campaigns to use their energy more productively, while those funding the same to find a better use for their resources.
That's why I asked in the beginning, who was he directing that
hold on.
at?
You see, in the very same context in Kitengela, the Deputy President was with the President. Actually, alikuwa anampiga push as he heads to Arusha. Now, he also spoke and said something, and this is what the Deputy President had to say.
Na hapa niko na kijana mwenzangu tunafanya kazi naye kwa serikali, awasalimie. Awasalimie. Haya basi ngojeni kidogo hapo. Haya. Kitengela hamjambo. Kitengela hamjambo. Mumesikia ile rais amesema? Rais amesema mchezo kando. Fitina kando. Siasa kando. Ufisadi nyuma. Sisi wa Kenya tunaenda mbele. Mnaungana na rais jameni? Hebu nione wanamwambia rais twende mbele, twende mbele, twende mbele. Kwa sababu imekuwa jioni na rais bado anaenda mpaka Arusha. Situachie hapo jameni. Asanteni sana, Mungu awabariki.
Sisi hatutakatia hapo, tutaendelea kidogo. In fact, put it this way. Is it out of the ordinary that the president was talking about politicking? I mean, it is on record. We are aware that he has called various people associated with this campaign for the deputy president and given them a tongue lash individually. Linus.
Let me make this observation. I'm not a body language expert, but I couldn't fail to notice first the position from which the deputy president spoke.
Yeah, I wrote that down.
It was lower than where the president was. The president was in this raised vehicle, and the deputy president, for the first time in a long time, he was speaking from a slightly lower podium. You remember in campaigns, in the entire first term, they always used to pop up together, almost equal. Today, this is what we've seen. That's number one. Number two is what the deputy president had to say. For the first time again, in a very rare thing, he didn't have a message of his own. He said, "Mumesikia vile rais amesema." Everything was focused on the president. I think the events of the last few weeks can put this to context. And let me put it traditionally, in Masailand, where I grew up, when you punish a child to correct them, on top of the beating, you tell them, "Tema." Spit it out. Yeah? So you spit out the mistake, which is what I think the statement today by David Mugonyi was all about.
Spitting it out?
It's spitting it out because this is interesting that the deputy president or his spokesman is actually denying knowledge of this team that has been campaigning for him in 2022, using very strong language like shenanigans. Who are these? I think there's footage of
absolutely. Yes. In fact, talking about footage, I have clips of members of parliament drumming up support for the deputy president.
In his presence?
In his presence. This was in Malinya. during the bullfighting session organized by former Senator Boni Halwale. Listen to what they were saying.
Sema yeye ni daktari wa siasa na atatibu Kenya na atatibu sisi wote. Si kweli? 2022 uongozi wa serikali ya dunia hii iko hapa na mtu anaitwa William Ruto, na sisi wenyewe tumesimama naye tunasema Mheshimiwa Ruto, kura ndio hizi, tunaomba mtusaidie tuingie katika bunge la kitaifa na katika ikulu. Mimi yangu ni kuuliza raundi hii, tufunguke macho raundi hii na tuweze kujenga hazra, tuseme tujenge moja wetu kama hazra mwenzetu. Au namna gani? Mara tunasema William Samoei Ruto mpaka wapi? Mwisho. Na ikifika wakati wa uchaguzi waache kuruka kama ngoma bado haijapigwa. Ikifika ngoma tutapiga na tutacheza ya siasa. Na tunashukuru Mungu sana kwako Deputy President, tukuambie liwe liwalo. Tuko nyuma yako, kunyeshe, kuwe na jua, kukauke, kuwe namna gani, tuko nyuma ya Deputy President.
Now listen to this statement, Francis, from David Mugonyi. Quote, at no time has the Deputy President approved, canvassed or engaged in another form of preparation for a presidential or another campaign after the last presidential election. The Deputy President therefore asks those making noisy charades and mock campaigns
like that one
to use their energy more productively, while those funding the same to find better use for their resources. Now this is Kutema properly. This you are in these events, but now you are saying have nothing to do with them. There was something even harsher about not involving them in their
the money
shenanigans as well.
Yeah,
yes,
and charades. And this is not the first. And by the way, if you're a lawyer, you know this Emalinya place. There's just sayings about it, and if you want to have a jibe at someone, there's something about tulikutana Emalinya ukaninunulia nini uji, but I found that very interesting about the place but that was not the first time. I mean, you remember viuno hivi vina shughuli.
Mbunge wa Malindi.
Aisha Jumwa. I mean, a lot of these things have been said, including some independent members of parliament. For me, the interesting thing is the time at which this statement is coming. Surely before, we have never seen the Deputy President come up on a podium after they have said it and said, guys, I will not entertain campaigns at a function at which I'm at. We are here to launch a project, to discuss development, but it is interesting that this statement comes today after this very lit cabinet meeting, and also after a number of series of rebukes we have seen from the president, that have just been in that direction. Even during that media roundtable, was it where he said, I will not discuss 2022? I mean, there have been a lot of signals that have been coming from one end that, listen, let's not do any of this, that led up to this. So that is why, for me, whatever happened in that cabinet meeting today seemed to have been, final.
For me, I look at it with funding, about funding. I think before the chief minister was brought into the picture after Executive Order number 1, 2019.
Zamila, we don't have a chief minister.
Nimeweka quotes hivi. We had the Deputy President going around the country, as we've seen in a lot of clips, and he mentioned about it because of launching development projects in different parts of this country. And he always has an entourage of politicians. My question is, who's funding all these trips?
No, I think that we have to admit around this table that what seems to be happening here is a legitimate political approach if you want to use it. Why do I say that? If, supposing, for example, that all the things we are saying here about how what the sequence of events might have been is true. For example, if you are saying that the president gave them a tongue lashing in the cabinet, including his deputy, for example, and said, I don't want this thing and whatever, and the deputy president decides, okay, this is it, we are going to roll this back. What do you do as a politician? You talk to your boys and girls in this case, and then you say that, hey, we have a problem here, So, guys, I'm going to throw you under the bus.
A good one.
Yes, but don't mind it. We'll solve this somewhere down the road. It happens many, many times. I mean, we know in the last, in the Kanu regime, for example, Nicholas Biwott was a very powerful minister. No one ever thought anything could happen to him. When there were all these allegations around him about the death of Robert Ouko, and there was a heat around the country, President Moi at the time essentially fired him for a period. And many people thought, well, maybe President Moi can't just fire Biwott. It must have been a gentleman's agreement, said, hey, you know what, this thing is really, really hot. Let's just let it cool off. So step back, kidogo. We sort this out. So I imagine the deputy president, if indeed this is what happened, he may have told his people, look, things are really hot right now. Nothing seems to be working. The president and his supporters seem to believe that these campaigns are really messing things up. And therefore, I'm going to cut you off publicly. We will still find our ways of recovering sometime later on. We have 4 years after all.
Finding a way of recovering, Linus, I see some of Deputy President William Ruto's supporters ask, what is it that he's doing now that he wasn't doing between 2013 and 2017? He was campaigning still for a second term for the Jubilee administration, or for the Ruto administration as we call it. So some are asking, what is it that he's doing different now that he wasn't doing, and why he should be bashed? Is there an answer to that question?
I think, like we pointed out in the last show, the main argument has been about his ambitions clashing with the legacy quest by President Kenyatta. That was not going to end well, because Uhuru Kenyatta, the president, knows that he has up to 2022, and as per the current constitution as it is, he'll have to retire. Now, if he doesn't achieve much, and part of the reason would be because half of his team was campaigning throughout for the next election, then it was going to run into the kind of problems we have seen this relationship running into. Now, what he's doing differently this time is being a deputy president, a vice president, the assistant of the president, principal assistant of the president. Even the language you see is going to change. In the first time, it was about Rais na mimi na Rais. You're not going to hear that. Especially look at how Kitengela was handled. Mumesikia Rais amesemaje. In previous engagements, I mean, you can go to file tapes and find a lot of some of those remarks saying that serikali ya Uhuru Kenyatta na Ruto. Now this is my government, and I think Joe had earlier pointed out to the remark by President Kenyatta saying serikali ya Uhuru Kenyatta. That is not a random thing. It's a thought out jab.
A lady called Mary Kahumbi is saying, guess what? Just like the president is unhappy with 2022 politics, so are we. We want development and nothing less of fighting corruption. Now, talking about that, I don't know whether we can mention slightly the issues within NASA too, because there's an upcoming by-election in Embakasi South, and Wiper is asking ODM, its brother in NASA, leave this seat to us. ODM is saying, none of it. Let's meet in the field. Tukutane kwa debe, Yvonne. What's happening?
NASA is dead. Remember when there were those conversations, you know, even before.
Dead like dead.
Hasn't it been though?
Carry on, Yvonne.
Carry on.
It seems like you spoke about it as a matter of fact, like you attended the funeral, but it is okay.
Yeah, I'm just, I'm the mortician. As one former Attorney General used to say, I mean, you know what, there's been issues within this, and clearly unresolved issues from the handshake. When one Kalonzo Musyoka says, hii kiti ndio yetu.
It's the only one he has in Nairobi.
It's the only one he has in Nairobi. And even when you have Jubilee pulling away, but then there's certain individuals within Jubilee who are also taking issue with the fact that they said they're not going to field a candidate and put their support behind one of them. I think this is going to be a tough one. Again, this role of the big boys within this coalition, they have very many unresolved issues from before. And you even had Edwin Sifuna's statement on the same. I mean, the reaction was swift, and it was, you know, a massacre. I mean, you know, and I wonder what that one seat would mean, and the risk.
But I think
between the two of them.
When Kalonzo Musyoka says this is the only Wiper seat in Nairobi, he's not just saying that this is the seat that they've held, but he's also saying, without saying, that this is possibly the only seat that Wiper can win in Nairobi.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Given the demographics of the city.
Right.
And if you look at the composition of that constituency, it is clear to many people who know Nairobi that that is a seat where Wiper has a very good chance, and the only one where they have that kind of chance in Nairobi. So it is important for Wiper. And anyway, which party leader doesn't want to have a bit of a say in the capital city? So that is one fact.
But Joe, I like how you're addressing it in words like demographics. The fact is, ethnicity is a big factor and has always been in the city
I went to a
politics.
good school. That is the fact.
In the old days, in KANU era, Westlands was the only seat KANU could win. Why? Because of the Luhya vote.
Yes.
And why?
Fred
because
Gumo.
of Fred Gumo. Now, Wiper is saying we have also identified a little place where there are a lot of people from Eastern Kenya. You can name them, Joe, don't fear. They come from Eastern Kenya.
You just said Eastern Kenya, which has Meru as well.
They're the majority, so they stand a chance of winning. But Francis, Yvonne said something almost in passing about the status of NASA. Now, coalitions are formed to win power, not to sit in the opposition benches.
Special purpose vehicles.
They're special
It's to win power.
vehicles. NASA
And
is
now
no
that
different
it's
from
not in power.
Jubilee. The difference is one is in power, the other one is not. And what keeps Jubilee together is they're in power. Now, NASA, what can keep an opposition together, especially following the complications brought about by the handshake? The handshake has sort of killed the opposition. We don't have an official opposition. Everybody is in government.
Dr. Ekuru Aukot says he's the official leader of opposition.
So does Musalia Mudavadi.
No, they don't have the numbers that can actually claim to that. But a lot of factors have complicated things, especially for NASA. It's very, very difficult for NASA to keep staying. But why they'll stay together is because they are watching what is this handshake going to bring up. And everybody is waiting there. You've heard of the proverbial hyena that waited for the hand to drop. So there are a lot of them waiting.
Talking about the hand, Jamila.
Yes.
I've seen, interestingly, some Jubilee members of parliament say they will support Mawathe, Julius Mawathe, the Wiper candidate. Simply because Jubilee did not field a candidate. So it's like, wow, that free player, they can play for either team.
Yes.
But the players who are free and their choice of the team that they want to play for is very deliberate.
Yes. and you mentioned that, and one Kalonzo Musyoka comes to mind, the Wiper leader. And we've seen him starting to speak up in the past few days. One of the reasons is because of this Embakasi South by-election, because I think for him and his party, they spoke, I think, a couple of days ago when they were giving the party ticket to Mawathe, saying that this is our choice, and for them, and Yvonne mentioned it, that this is the only Wiper seat that they have in Nairobi. But Kalonzo is facing, I think, opposition from 3 governors in his Ukambani backyard.
Opposition from within?
From within. Dr. Alfred Mutua in Machakos, Charity Ngilu in Kitui, and Kivutha Kibwana in Makueni. And I think for him now, he's starting to speak up because the rebellion by the governors and the handshake deal between the president and Raila, who I think Kalonzo seems a bit lost in that handshake. And of course, this by-election have stirred Mr. Musyoka to action. Remember, the 3 governors were saying that they need to look for a different direction in terms of the politics of that region, because Mr. Musyoka's 3 bids to try and at least get the presidency have been unsuccessful. So I think for him now, he's trying now to fight for his space.
Time is running out.
All right, let's take this home. And we go to my angle, which tonight is on the money. Which money, you may ask? Yes, money for members of parliament. Let me be clear, it is actually former members of parliament, but what difference does it make? Because it seems that when it comes to money, they are all the same, or are they? Let me explain. You see, it is now emerging that the Parliamentary Service Commission is pushing to have some 300 former members of parliament paid by you, the taxpayer, an exit package of at least 7 million shillings each. Now, if you do the math, this adds up to a total of 2.1 billion shillings, billion with a B. I'll come back to this interesting concept of exit package. But first, let me give you an idea of just how much money we are talking about. 2.1 billion shillings is so much that if you were to break it down to 1,000 shilling notes and lay them all down flat on level ground, that money would carpet 6 acres of land. Don't ask me how many schools or hospitals that would build, but that would just be 2 billion. You would still have some change, 100,000 shillings, perhaps to pay the laborers for arranging the notes on the 6-acre field. But I digress. These former MPs are to be paid because they exited Parliament. And it's not as if they left so honorably as to warrant a big party. They were rejected by the people who elected them. And many of them after just 1 term. That means the people didn't think they did a good job. It probably works differently in Parliament, but out here where we are, the rule is simple. No one gets rewarded for doing a bad job. What's more, this payment that is being sought would also be a direct contravention of the Parliamentary Pensions Act, passed by the very same Parliament. But I guess these guys are powerful. After all, they are members of the august house. They make all these laws. Who are we, lesser mortals, to fathom their mysterious ways? But what is clear is that when I grow up, I want to be a 1-term member of Parliament. That's my angle.
Interestingly. Now, let me punch it a little.
Yes, that is. Maybe I should do that after this, right?
Please do.
Yeah.
Then I punch.
Then you punch. You seem like you were raring to go with this one.
Put the punch on hold.
Yes, right. So my take tonight is about what we've been discussing. The conference that took place last week, the one on corruption. It was a 2-day event put together by the Multi-Sectoral Initiative Against Corruption, a group which had several meetings last year, culminating in the conference last week. Now, during those 2 days, we heard from just about everyone. Investigating authorities who all heaped blame on the judiciary for not playing ball. The judiciary that has consistently said they are simply doing their job and that they will not convict anyone on weak evidence. The private sector conducted a survey asking who has taken a bribe or given one, what needs to be in place to fight what they called a scourge. The media, too, was not left behind, praising the DCI and the ODPP and castigating the judiciary, promising to clean house from brown envelope journalism or brown briefcase journalism, as we've heard tonight. The international community reiterated their support, pledged to continue to do more, assuaged us that this is a global problem. There was clapping, there was praying, there was nodding heads in agreement, perhaps a little more candid talk from the DCI and the ODPP in what has now become a refrain from them, placing the blame elsewhere. Panels, pledges, commitments, recommitments, pleas to declare it a national disaster, renaming corruption to theft. Why does this all sound so familiar? Haven't we heard this all before? Now, you may call me skeptic or cynical, but listen, folks, we are not short of good laws in this country. We are not short of resources to fight corruption. We are not short of solutions. Certainly not short of institutions to do so. The EACC, the Economic Crimes Division in the court, a DCI, NIS, Controller of Budget, Auditor General. So why don't we just get the job done? Did we really need to spend millions of shillings over the course of 2 days seated in one conference hall to speak of our frustrations, restate our challenges, and restate our commitments? My take is this: the war on corruption will not be won if we do not get a value system in place. A central GPS in our minds that makes theft, plunder, corruption, whatever you want to call it, so abhorrent. A respect for the rule of law. It will not be won until we catch and jail the bad guys, until we exhibit that there is such a heavy price to pay for it. It will not be won until we stop glorifying the corrupt people, stop voting them in, until those who are corrupt are treated like the lepers of yore, totally ostracized from civilized society to go out and die of thirst in the wilderness. It will not be won until we all, in our various capacities, from government to investigating authorities, judiciary, private sector, yes, even the media and everyone in between, actually starts fighting corruption, rather than just talking about fighting corruption. Let's not talk anymore or spend any more money talking. Let's just do it. And that is my take tonight.
Well, some are lit. Now, mine is simple. We are also the story of Ruth Rono, that first-class honors degree holder from Chuka University. And she represents very many of our young people who are coming out of universities every other time. I mean, we see graduation ceremonies every so often. But two quick questions. Does our country have the right value for its educated people? What is our education system about? What are we teaching people to be? To be employable, or to be people who can create opportunities to employ others? And what do we do with those that acquire the best skills in our universities? How do we treat them? I mean, this is one of the countries, or actually the country, where first-class degree holders are languishing, but we are giving some top jobs, including ministerial flags, to people whose academic qualifications we are not sure of. So let's get it right. That's it.
My kicker tonight bears a simple title: Today in History. This very hour and day last year, there was darkness in this very studio. This TV station, Citizen TV, alongside KTN and NTV, was on its second night off the air. The three stations had been forcefully shut down by government agents, supposedly for covering the controversial presidential oath-taking by opposition leader Raila Odinga at Uhuru Park on 30th of January 2018. That is last year, yesterday. This very hour and night last year, the tension and anxiety across the country was palpable, and the political uncertainty higher than it had been at any point during the 6 months of presidential elections and swearing-in ceremonies between the 8th of August 2017 and January 30th, 2018. This very hour and night last year, Kenya was divided down the middle, complete with talk of regional secession and even some odd maps of two new republics. This hour last year, the country had lost its mind and was fast descending down the path of self-destruction. This very hour and night last year, I was on the run. Together with my colleagues Larry Madowo of the BBC and Kenneth Mijungu of NTV, we were forced to go into hiding to escape what I can only describe today as the mindless zeal of parochial dark forces. With Larry and Ken, we'd spent this night last year away from our homes and families, and thankfully away from the path of those out to harm or detain us. The nationwide unease of this very hour and night last year was to reign throughout February 2018, a month that saw the country sink deeper into destructive divisions. We became a country of us versus them, and everyone, including journalists, were profiled in the strict zebra stripes: Uhuru Kenyatta or Raila Odinga. As a journalist, I have covered the war in the Democratic Republic of Congo, the conflict in Burundi, and even in Darfur, Sudan. But those were seemingly the good old days. Days following this night last year, the national madness continued, with dire consequences for chosen individuals. A lot has changed since this night last year, especially for the country. And folks, that is all that matters. March 9 happened. The handshake somehow jolted the country and everyone back to reason. With reason prevailing, a nation and its citizens can soberly chart its common path and destiny. And journalists and media would also get the room and space to help the country navigate some of its toughest challenges, key of all being the truth. Have a truthful night.
Wow, I remember that night. Mine sounds tame after that. But anyway, to my memo now. In the past few days, the government has taken Nairobi residents on a very long, confusing ride about something that is fast becoming infamous: car-free days. It began with the Ministry of Transport directive that starting February 1st, that should have been tomorrow, no vehicle would be allowed in the Nairobi Central Business District on Wednesdays and Saturdays. That's the term car-free days. According to the government, this plan will pave way for the much-hyped bus rapid transit system aimed at decongesting the city. Hawkers are going to be allowed to take over the streets for the entire 2 days and sell their wares on the numerous parking lots in the city centre. A pilot was to start on Saturday before a full rollout on Wednesday next week. But then another twist. A new announcement came that the pilot would be in fact done on Friday, tomorrow. And yesterday, the whole plan was postponed for at least 2 more weeks because apparently the traders being targeted had not been identified. So just who are these traders and how will they be identified? What's more, once this directive is implemented, what happens to, say, a guest who is arriving from Australia or Dubai on a Wednesday and is booked to stay at the Stanley Hotel or the Hilton or perhaps Serena? Does this individual take a boda? Oh, I forgot, that is also illegal, it seems. So does he or she jump onto a bicycle or drop off at Uhuru Highway and drag the suitcase all the way to the hotel? That would be quite a sight to behold. And by the way, is this really about decongesting the city or giving hawkers 2 more days to get an extra coin? If the latter is the case, that is perhaps okay. But if this is really about easing traffic in the city, the people in government surely know that it will take a lot more than just forcing people to leave their cars at home 2 days every week. That's my memo.
We're done. Right.
The comments are lit.
Someone said that it is corruption for us to air Newsgang after 10 p.m. It should come early.
8 p.m. in Swahili.
Yeah, you know, I think we should actually credit him because it would be corruption again to not mention him.
Yeah.
Peter Rono on Twitter. And you know, it is lit
it's a good
on
way
Twitter,
to,
as they
it's a good
say.
way to end the show.
#Newsgang. So keep talking about
So
this.
can we launch
the end
of the program?
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, we can.
We hereby declare the program officially closed.